Okay, Classroom A, so MISTI. This is a review of the week 2 stuff. In week 2 we had a look at the golem, the Jianxi, which is the Chinese take on the vampire, homunculus, Frankenstein, gingerbread man, Pygmalion. All of these things are creations that have come alive, that people have brought to life somehow, or their stories about that. And it's interesting because they share a lot of common stuff that we can use when we're looking at making servitors and egregores and stuff like that. Some of the common threads that you'll see are names being an important thing, the name of the creature being kind of essentially linked to the nature of the thing, or even giving it life. From our perspective, the name, when it comes to servitors, the name is very important because it becomes an audio sigil for the servitor or whatever it is, and it kind of defines the current that it belongs to. So with the correspondences that you choose, the name is essential, and that is a really important aspect to have a look at, because people will be using the name of the servitor more than anything else, really. It will play a big role in defining it and kind of being the servitor itself. So yeah, names are important. Breath again. Breath always is really essential in all of these things. If you have a look at a lot of the mysticism and in martial arts, a lot of religions or spiritual things, breath is always really important and kind of linked to life and linked to like chi, energy, prana and stuff like that. It's all kind of the same thing. It's kind of interchangeable. Breath is life. Even in the Bible, it says that God breathed life into the earth, which then became man. But yeah, you'll see it along many different religions and folklore, mythologies, all that kind of stuff. So breath is important. So how you can incorporate breath into servitor work is there's a number of ways. You can use your own breath during the exercises, during the creation of the servitor itself. Also, important thing is to the servitor itself breathing. If you can kind of visualize that or imagine that, because that is kind of the indication of a living entity. That is something that is kind of separate from us and is alive. I mean, when a baby is born, the first thing it does is it takes a big breath, and that is kind of like the defining moment of it, being a separate thing and kind of being alive by itself. This is the thing. Breath and feeding are kind of very interchangeable. They're for servitors, they're pretty much the same. Yeah, we'll get back to that. Another common theme that we'll see is putting pieces together, Frankenstein story, undead golems and so on. We do the same with servitors, and later on when we have a look at the human creation stories, there are Genesis stories that fit with that align with this idea that these things, or us, are the servitors, are creations that are kind of put together pieces of the creator entity, or different materials that are all stuck together and kind of then form a solid unified whole and carry on. And this is what you do with servitors to an extent. We all the different correspondences, the name, the sigil, the intent, all the different kind of parts of the rituals and stuff that you do to put together the servitor, that becomes the different components that are kind of sewn together by the definition of the servitor, by the understanding that this is a separate thing to ourselves, and the more we define it, the more it kind of sticks together like glue. The definition is the glue that holds the servitor together. Aligning with currents, we've covered that a little bit. Getting out of control. A lot of these stories tell us about one of these creatures that gets out of control, because of feeding or because of, you know, that violated some kind of taboo, some kind of a rule that was broken, and then it goes crazy and starts eating people or whatever. So yeah, servitors, we need to be a bit careful that they don't get out of hand. The common themes about that are usually related to feeding or power. This thing grows like, you know, out of control of the person who made it, or becomes hungry and goes off on its own mission. Right. External animating agency. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. This is something that we can use when we make servitors ourselves. The idea that something else animates it, that there's a separate entity, God or the universe or whatever. That is kind of quite a clever sleight of mind that we can use to do that, because it's quite meta in a way, in that I mean, we are the ones creating it, but using that idea gives us a tool to create them more efficiently, because the supposition is that it's, you know, being done externally to us, which is great, because we kind of hand that power over. We kind of stop ourselves from interfering with it, which is useful sometimes. With the Jianxi, there's an interesting thing. That's the Chinese vampires. The idea is that they are animated because there's two types of mind, and when people die, sometimes the one type of mind goes away and the other type of mind decides to stay, and then this animates the body and it carries on. There are parallels, of course, here with, you know, the conscious and the subconscious. The kind of more basic reptilian brain, and then the more cognitive, higher functioning capacity that we have, which leaves us when we die. But also, I mean, this parallels magic quite well, in that we tend, you know, the mind and cognitive stuff tends to get in our way more often than not when it comes to magic, and basically all of magic and all the systems are basically designed to allow ourselves to get out of our own way, to get the mind out of the way and just let the magic happen, you know. So that's an interesting thing when it comes to the Chinese vampires. An interesting story there. Alright, then we had a look at human creation stories. There's a few different categories. One is creation from nothing, which is interesting. The purpose of looking at the human creation stories is that it kind of parallels what you're doing with servitors as well, in that we are kind of creating something out of nothing, pretty much. The human creation stories, looking at them, there's also value in kind of aligning with the gods, with the forces that are in these stories. If we invoke them or access them, or, you know, summon them, or kind of tap into that current, they are aligned already with a creation energy, with a kind of Genesis kind of force that we could use for our own servitors. So yeah, I mean, you can do a lot of that with that kind of idea. So creation from nothing is a cool idea, in that everything was created out of nothing, which contrasts with the idea that everything was created out of some pre-existent eternal matter. And there's also a subsection that kind of has a look at creation out of the being of God, which is, you know, these three ideas tie up with different ways of making servitors, and the stuff that we looked at in week 1, the different ways that people consider servitors, the different ways that people see them and consider how they are made and what they are. Some people see them as external parts of the person that made them, like an energy or will or something that is external, that takes a life of its own. You can also see it as a subconscious projection of the person that made it, or you can see it as more of a group kind of unconsciousness, or you can see it as a manifestation of an archetype that exists already, So yeah, and these tie up with these human creation stories in a way. All right, and there's another one is creation from chaos. Creation from chaos is interesting, because we are doing that as well with the servitors. Chaos is understood to be primordial, unformed potential. In the chaos magic paradigm, this is what we have a look at. Chaos is the material from which all kind of potential comes, and the chaos magic paradigm attempts to allow us to interact with that and manifest the desires that we're looking for, or at least kind of understand it. So yeah, this fits very well with the chaos magic idea and how we go about creating servitors. From creation from chaos, it's a yawning nothingness, and then from there came the primary divine beings, the kind of elements from which more complicated things are created. When you create servitors, we use our will and intent to form this thing. This is why defining the servitor is so important. It separates what it is from what it is not and forms it. The details such as name, appearance, personality, correspondences, voice, etc. are all pieces that glue and hold the servitor together. Indeed. Sound and word. This is also really, really important. As far as I understand, we kind of create in three ways mainly. One is with the words that we speak, another is with the thoughts that we think, and the third is with the actions that we take. All of these are kind of creations that we make. They're manifestations of our will and our intent, and they are already aligned with the idea of creation. They're already kind of creative acts. So using these to create servitors or to do magic generally, makes perfect sense. So they're powerful tools. I mean, there's no point in not using them. Sound and words are pretty much covered. And when you have the name for your servitor, the act of saying the name defines the servitor. It summons the servitor, kind of adds to it. Speaking the name is a creative act and gives form to something that was not there, which is what we are doing with servitors. It's kind of like a microcosm of that. It gets quite Inception-like. It's pretty interesting stuff. In some of these human creation mythology stories, you'll see that the gods used words and sounds to create the world and people, which parallels kind of what we're doing here. Oh yeah, back to breath for a second. Breath being very essential, being a cornerstone for all of magic and kind of mysticism and spirituality, as far as I understand. The word spirit actually comes from breath. They've got the same Latin roots, and they are considered the same thing. Spirit and breath are the same, are kind of from the same root. They're very closely related. And of course there's inspiration and respiration. All of these things are all linked together. And people that enjoy, having a look at words and how they're related in concepts and how kind of archetypes bleed over from similar words, I think there's a lot to explore over there. It's interesting stuff. When we have a look at egregores, in week one we defined the differences between egregores and servitors and those kind of things, but I think it's easy to forget that egregores, you can get egregores of nations, celebrities, music bands, companies, churches, any kind of groups of people have a very particular kind of flavor about them, and the intent that is shared amongst the members becomes a tangible thing. It becomes a current that pushes them and defines them and unifies them. CMG, has an egregore itself, which is an interesting thing to work with sometimes, because it can be a bit contrary at times. So if you're going to do that, And then, of course, people talk about team spirit and the spirit of competition and all of that. And this fits in very well with the idea of egregores that we have. Because the only thing that nations or teams or any kind of groups of people have is their definition. I mean, a nation is only defined by what it's not. It's just a group of people on a specific place, and that's what defines them. I mean, there's no particular qualities that separate them from anyone else aside from that. So it's clearly the definition of them that kind of creates this group mentality, this group spirit, which is quite weird and interesting. So it's the definition of what it is and what it isn't that is the egregore itself, that people align with. But yeah, we can use that, to create egregores ourselves. It's just so the egregore of humanity, the egregore of humankind, or people, would be God, I suppose, to some extent. People have different ideas of God, pretty much, but it is possible to communicate and interact with this egregore of humanity, like the entire human kind of overmind, I guess, or which is related to the collective unconscious. Some interesting stuff there. When you're using correspondences to make your servitors, I advise using all the different senses for a more complete kind of experience and a more substantial, solid, complete image of the servitor that you're making. That's something that can be useful. All right, I've got a bunch of questions to answer, but I'll do that in a separate video.